Hi, I'm Steve Collison, and I'm talking to Richard Holmes, a financial planner for expats from Gerard's Wealth Management. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Steve.
We're here today to talk about the main personal finance issues that expats face. As a 40-something expat chartered accountant who's made big life and career changes, this is particularly relevant to me, both personally and professionally. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I've been working as a financial planner for 23 years, fully UK qualified, started off in Birmingham, moved to Hungary 19 years ago. I worked for a firm here for a few years, and then about 15 years ago, I set my own business up, Gerard's Wealth Management, specialising working with expats, and most of the expats I work with are based in the EU.
What are the biggest worries, concerns and problems for people when it comes to personal finance?
For most people, I would say it's financial uncertainty and fear of the unknown. And this stems from people having big questions which just go unanswered. So questions like, when can I afford to retire? Am I going to be okay? Are my family going to be okay if anything happens to me? How much money do I need to be able to live the life that I want to live? And these questions just seem to remain unanswered, and they seem to rattle around in people's heads. And that seems to be the cause of uncertainty and stress, anxiety. And I would say that's the main issue for the vast majority of people.
How do you help your clients remove financial worry from their lives and answer their big questions?
Well, I would start with where they are now. I would try and get to understand what their current situation is, to understand what their backstory is, how they got to where they are now, to understand where they're heading to, what they're trying to achieve in the future. Life is short. What do you want to do? I'd be asking the question, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? What do you want to happen in the rest of your life? What don't you want to happen? What are your big questions? What kind of lifestyle do you have now? What kind of lifestyle do you want to have in the future? And then when I understand all of that, and by the way, that's called life planning. So when I understand that, then I would take that hat off, put on my financial planning hat. And financial planning is when we answer all of those big questions. And the main overriding question that people have is, how much money do I need to enable me to maintain my desired lifestyle without fear of running out of money? We would then answer all the other questions. When can you afford to retire? Will your family be okay if anything happens to you? Help people to understand better their current financial situation and see, perhaps for the first time, what their financial future looks like. And we're then building interactively a meaningful financial plan for them. And if that financial plan, which invariably it usually does, require financial infrastructure, then we would move on. I would take off the financial planner hat, I'd put on the independent financial advisor's hat, and that's when we'd build the financial infrastructure. But the whole service proposition revolves not around their money, but around them and their lives and what they're trying to achieve.
So once a financial plan is in place, are we all set?
Well, no, it's not a set and forget process. So a financial plan is always a draft plan. It's always a work in progress. So we need to revisit it at least once a year to make sure that we're prepared for life's transitions and to make sure that we identify if anything needs to be done to keep you on track. An analogy I might use could be a plane flying from London to New York. That plane is actually off course around about 95% of the time. So it's the autopilot that is constantly pulling it back on course. And it's those minor course adjustments that make sure the plane gets to its destination. And if it wasn't for that, the plane might end up in somewhere like Cuba instead of New York. So that's how I would describe the ongoing financial planning process. But the thing to remember, it's always only ever a draft plan. It's always work in progress.
What should somebody who is nearing retirement be thinking about?
Well, I think when a financial planner talks with a client about retirement, it's more of a money-focused conversation. And I would start with a life-centered conversation, because retirement it's an unnatural finish. It's an unnatural state to go from a life of all work to all leisure. It's not good for us. And most people actually spend more time planning a 2-week holiday than they do a 30-year retirement. So what I would want to do is really have a conversation with people about what their ideal retirement would look like. And I also recommend that clients read a book that I think is really helpful to help clients really start to think about retirement and to get prepared. It's by Mitch Anthony. It's called The New Retire Mentality. And just to borrow a quote from the book, Mitch actually, one of his quotes is, there are 2 things you need to retire well. One is to have enough money to sleep at night, and the other is to have enough purpose to get up in the morning. So once I understand what the ideal retirement looks like, then we can begin to work out how we're going to pay for it. So this is the approach I would take.
What are the main risks faced by people who are heading towards or are in retirement, and how might you help them manage those risks?
It's a big area. I'll try and cover the key points. So as we're approaching retirement, we're in what's known as the accumulation phase. So we're building up, trying to build up enough money so that we can have the retirement that we want. And then as we're at the point of retirement, as we're at the peak, and then we start heading down into what's known as the decumulation phase. And that's when we start to look to take an income from our invested pension pot. And there are a number of risks at that stage. A big risk question, if you like, is, are you going to outlive your money, or is your money going to outlive you? The other things we need to consider are a non-smoking couple retiring at 60 have a joint life expectancy of 30 years. So in English, that means that the second will live till around about the age of 90. We also need to think about inflation, the thief that keeps on taking. At a trend line inflation rate of 3%, this means that what will cost £1 in the first year of retirement will cost roughly £2.40 in the 30th year of retirement. These are the problems, these are the things we need to consider. So how do we solve these problems? Well, we need to make sure that the way our pot is invested in a way that gives you the best chance of at least maintaining the income against inflation, and ideally outperforming inflation. And we need to identify initially a safe withdrawal rate that will allow the client to get the income they need, ideally maximise the income, and allow them to spend with confidence, so they knowing that they're getting the income they need, it's going to rise in line with inflation without fear of running out of money while they're still alive. I have a guide which covers the main problems and risks that people face on the retirement journey, and explains how we solve those problems and how we can manage those risks. So if anybody would like me to send a copy to them, just send me an email using the contact details below.
What advice might you give to someone who's looking to invest a cash lump sum?
Well, I would really need to understand, what is the cash for? What are they looking to achieve? So I would start at the beginning and get to understand what their current situation is. I'd really need to understand what they're trying to achieve, where they're trying to get to, and what is the purpose of that investment. Then we would move on to building the financial plan. Where would that cash sit in the context of that financial plan? Again, where are they trying to get to? And then once we've agreed on the financial plan, then I can then move on to providing the investment advice. But when I do provide the investment advice, it's based upon fully understanding their real needs and what they're trying to achieve. So effectively, we need a financial plan. Everybody gets a financial plan before they get a portfolio, and that's the way I would. That's the way we'd do that.
Is it a good strategy to try to predict what the market is going to do, then make changes to your investment portfolio?
Well, the short answer is no. I think the world's most famous investor, Warren Buffett, put it best when he said the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. So, for instance, if we say we've got John over here, and John feels that he's trying to predict or anticipate what the market's going to do next, and buy and sell based upon what he thinks is going to happen next. But of course he doesn't know what's going to happen next because the future's unknowable. So all he's really doing is making decisions based upon what he feels, making emotional decisions, purely emotional decisions. Or you could be like Warren, who understands that what he can see from history, because history is the only guide we have, and even if we look at, say, the S&P 500, the biggest stock market in the world, since the end of the Second World War, the S&P 500 on average has fallen 14% on average every year. Roughly every 6 years, it's fallen by about a third. But those declines have only been temporary declines, and the market has recovered, it's gone on to new highs, and it's continued the long-term advance. And the S&P 500 has returned on average about 10% per annum since the end of the Second World War. So with that knowledge, armed with that knowledge, I think it's quite clear which is the best strategy. I think Warren's doing it the right way. Through the financial planning process, when clients actually realise that if this investment is to fund their retirement, then they realise that this is actually multi-decade, even maybe multi-generational wealth, and that what they can do is take a long-term view on how this money is invested and not really have to be influenced by the media who perhaps are broadcasting that the sky is going to fall in and dramatising the latest crisis of the day. They can afford just to tune that out and just take a long-term view.
Now, I'm quite interested in behavioural finance. How much does people's behaviour play into all this, specifically with regards to reaching their financial goals?
It's a mistake to think that financial success is more about how smart we are. It's actually more to do with our behaviour rather than our intelligence. As human beings, we really struggle with the complexity of the modern world, and we struggle with fear of the unknown. So when we're gripped by fear, uncertainty, stress, anxiety, concern, when we're in those emotional states, we then go into, our brain puts us into fight and flight mode. And when we're in that mode, the part of our brain that is responsible for rational thinking and decision making, the prefrontal cortex, becomes inhibited, because other parts of our brain are saying, we're going to inhibit you from decision making, we're going to take over, we sense danger, and we're going to get us out of here. So the way we're hardwired for another time. We're basically hardwired to survive and reproduce. We're not hardwired to make prudent, long-term financial decisions. And there's a mismatch between our brain and society. Our brains are 150,000 years old, and they haven't really developed an awful lot in that time. Society has developed very rapidly. Modern capital markets are 400 years old, and again, we have a brain, a piece of equipment that, amazing as it is, it's just not equipped to deal with the complexity of modern life. The benefit of financial planning done properly is that it removes or reduces stress, anxiety, uncertainty, and leaves us with peace of mind, which which is a better mental state to help us make better financial decisions. And a financial plan is like a behavioural roadmap with behavioural guardrails built in, which helps keep us on the straight and narrow and help us to avoid sudden emotional decisions.
We often hear about scams. Do you have any advice on how to spot and avoid a scam?
Well, if it's too good to be true, the odds are there's a good chance it could be a scam. And if anything is too good to be true, my advice would be just to take a pass. Also look for things like if in the marketing, so I see what I believe are scams on quite a regular basis in social media, even by email you receive them. And if all they're talking about is the benefits and not the risks, and usually there's a compelling story, there's a hook in there that's designed to reel people in, then they would be telltale signs of a scam. And the problem with a scam is that you've got a risk of losing all of your capital permanently. So if it's too good to be true, just run in the opposite direction. That's my advice.
When people are looking to get financial advice, what might they need to consider?
The simple answer is there are two options. So there is a financial advisor who is employed by you, the client, and paid by you, the client, and only paid by you. And then the other option is an advisor who is paid by the financial services industry. The first option, a qualified professional, working transparently, only paid by you, just as would be an accountant, a lawyer, an architect, who sits on your side of the table and works purely in your best interest. And this is how I work. Then the other option is, if we look at the financial services industry, it exists to manufacture and distribute financial products, and it relies on financial advisors to distribute those products for it. And it pays financial advisors to do that. So there's a conflict of interest there. Also, there's a tendency for advisors to recommend products that pay the higher commission, which is something that, as a client, is clearly not in your best interest. So if anybody has any doubts or concerns about the advice that they're getting, or they'd like a second opinion, I'm happy to have a conversation without cost or obligation. And you can get hold of me with the contact details below.
We're living in uncertain times and we're in a global recession. So what advice would you give to people who are worried about the impact of all this on their investments? What should they be doing?
The general advice I would give that would work for most people would be not to react. Ideally, if you have a plan, then you would be continuously acting on the plan and not reacting to the markets. So it's essential to get a plan. But think about what is the purpose of this money. Because if this money is if you're saving for retirement, for example, it could be that this is multi-decade, multi-generational money. So taking a short-term view, listening to the media who are telling us that the sky is going to fall in, and listening to financial gurus who are trying to tell you what you need to do when they know nothing about you, is often a huge mistake. So the sensible thing to do for most people, if you have a well-diversified equity portfolio, and this money is for a long-term purpose, is just to basically tune out what's happening now and just ride it out.
What do you think is the best investment anyone could make?
I think the best investment anybody can make is to hire a financial planner, a life-centred financial planner who puts your life at the centre of the conversation, a qualified professional who's going to tell you the unvarnished truth, who's going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Somebody who is going to show you what your financial future looks like, who is going to simplify your financial life by helping you make sense of your money, and ultimately somebody who is going to help you and your family to achieve the best life possible with the money that you have.
Do you have a particular philosophy when it comes to personal finance?
My philosophy around personal finance is that I view money as a tool. So it's just a tool that, if correctly utilised, can enable us to get and keep the life that we want. So money isn't there for the sake of money. Money's there for the sake of you. And my role is to help you and your family get the best life possible from the money that you have.
Thank you very much indeed for sitting with me today to talk about personal finance. It's been very insightful.
And thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.